Hi, my name is Craig Richardson, and welcome to Mind to Heart. In this show, we take a journey from our logical, critical mind to the powerful heart center where real transformation occurs. My guests help us understand our journeys by telling us about their paths and lessons that they've learned along the way. In today's show, I'm delighted to bring on my friend, Susan Luck, who, like so many people, has experienced a near-death experience, or NDE for short. In 1975, Raymond Moody, who many consider to be the father of the NDE movement, released a book called Life After Life. In this groundbreaking work, Moody interviewed 150 individuals who had experienced an NDE. He found striking similarities about what they all went through, including an overwhelming feeling of peace and well-being, including freedom from pain, the impression of being located outside of one's physical body, floating or drifting through darkness, sometimes described as a tunnel, becoming aware of a golden light, encountering and perhaps communicating with a being of light, having a rapid succession of visual images of one's past, which some refer to as a life review, and experiencing another world of much beauty. Modern Western science largely ignores and still attempts to explain away the NDE phenomena, despite the overwhelming evidence to the contrary, and the countless other cultures around the world and throughout history who have taught a similar aspect to our lives. And that is the soul, or our consciousness, continues after the so-called change called death, as the spiritualists put it. NDEs also have the universal effect of changing people's lives forever, regardless of when they encountered the experience. And many, not surprisingly, after basking in the bright glow of God's love, really don't want to come back. When they do, however, the NDE makes them more appreciative of this life here, and they tend not to sweat the little stuff as much as those of us who haven't had such an experience. It also has a profound impact on one's spirituality. Imagine not only hoping for, but actually knowing that there is a universal, benevolent, and loving God, along with our departed loved ones waiting for us when we transition from the earth plane. To help us understand more about NDEs and to hear how it's impacted her life and journey, I'm delighted to welcome Susan Luck to the show. Susan, welcome to Mind to Heart.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I've known you for a little while now, and I've gotten bits and pieces, so I'm really excited to hear. I love NDE experiences, because while they do have similarities, they are unique. And since that's the focus of our show today, I want to begin there, and then we'll paint in the rest of your life in the other segment. So, can you start just by, not necessarily jumping the NDE, but what led up to that, the illness that you had, your age? I think you were in your 20s, and just sort of take us from the point of the crisis and through the actual experience.
Sure. So I was 25 and married at the time, and my in-laws were staying with us. And my mother-in-law cooked my father-in-law's favorite dinner. He had prostate surgery and had come home, and she made steak, baked potato salad, and iced tea. That was his favorite. And after dinner, we were all watching TV, and I started feeling weird. I didn't feel well. So I said, I'm going to go upstairs. I'm not feeling well. By the time I got from the den to the top of the stairs, I couldn't breathe, and nothing was coming out. And I sort of panicked and went into my bathroom, and I've had allergies my whole life. So I grabbed a Benadryl and a cold medicine, took one of each, and I couldn't say anything. I couldn't holler. I couldn't talk. So I started throwing things down the steps. And here comes everybody up the steps. And when I tried to talk, what I've learned is that's why people call slang, when you die, you croak. You make a croaking sound. And I started making that sound. My ex-husband said, we're going to the emergency room. And of course, I, in my wisdom, said no. And so he called my mother, because he knew if my mother said go, I'd go. And he put her on the phone, and I croaked again. Nothing was coming out. And she said, I'll meet you at the hospital. So in the meantime, she called my entire family and told them that I would be dead before I got to the hospital.
No reason
And
to spread panic, right?
yeah, she said that she thought I was like almost dead. And I I remember walking down the hall. My mother-in-law was standing there. That's the last thing I remember at home, is seeing her. And she said I was gray, and she thought I was going to die before I got to the car. So the next thing I remember is being in the emergency room, sitting in that seat, you know, where they take the intake. And I don't know how I got there. And she asked me a question, and I croaked again, made this sound. And she said, in with this loudspeaker, she's sounding. And people just came from everywhere. And the next thing I knew, I was on a gurney and back in the emergency room. A doctor came up, and I still had that cold medicine and the Benadryl in my hand. And I tried to show him that's what I'd taken. And I remember he knocked it out of my hand, and he said, if you have any problem with that, we'll deal with it later. Don't go to sleep. So that was the last I remember that way. The next thing, I was on the ceiling, and I used to watch really a lot of TV, so I guess I'm very tuned into TV. My thought was literally, hey, this is pretty cool. It's just like TV. It was like watching an emergency room show. People were running with carts and IVs, and they just run. I couldn't see my body. There were people over my body. So I didn't see me. I just saw all this activity and all these people. And I just thought it was so cool. And the feeling was, oh, I can still feel it, was incredibly peaceful, incredibly comfortable. It was incredibly positive. I mean, I was just floating and feeling great. I could breathe, or I didn't know there wasn't any
Right. You weren't
problems.
gasping for
I
air,
was
right?
just, nope. I just was really peaceful. And after, I don't know how long, someone came up to my right side. Now, I never saw them. I think they were female, and said to me exactly these words, "Are you ready to go?" And I said immediately, "No, I've got too much to do." And I didn't mean like wash the dishes. You know, I have always
You're only
felt,
25. You're 25. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I've always felt like I have this thing I'm supposed to do, you know, with my life. And so that was that. And the next thing, I was looking up at the doctor, and
Wow.
I thought that was weird. Now, I didn't think being on the ceiling was weird. It was really cool. But when I was all of a sudden looking from laying down and I saw the doctor's face, I thought that was weird. I don't know why. Now, I'm going to do a little uh, intro here. The thing that I have learned since this time, I have a dear friend who had an NDE at 17, and he was asked the exact same thing. Are you ready to go? And I was listening to a Hay House session, and there was a gentleman who'd had a really wild experience while he was dead. And at the end of his, he said he was asked, quote, "Are you ready to go?" So I just think at some point I want to do some research. And is that common? Is that what we're asked? So anyway,
Yeah, I
I
think
went,
probably, and I'd be interested in the research. Probably some of that's just because the age 17 and 25. I have heard it the other way where they say you got to go, you've got stuff to do, and they're like, no, I don't want to go. So I
yeah,
think that's probably, and who knows what you guys, and you said you have that burning desire. There's something in your life's purpose that you had to continue to do.
yeah, definitely. So I saw the doctor and fell asleep. I woke up about 2 o'clock in the morning and I thought I was going to fall out the bed. My whole body was vibrating. And there was this, and I call her an angel nurse. She had to be an angel. This little nurse was sitting beside me and I said, "What's wrong with me? I'm not nervous." And she said, "No, no, no, it's the epinephrine." I said, "Oh, okay." And she said, "You have some people to see you." And I thought that was so weird. And I said, "What?" And she said, "Yeah, you." So here comes my whole family in a little line back to the emergency room, tears, little tears, crying, patting my hand. And I was looking at them like, what is wrong with them? So here they all come. I mean, mom had gotten them all, and all of them, little tears, little, da da da. So they left, and I said to the little angel nurse, I said, "What's wrong with them? Why are they here? And
What's wrong with
why are
them?
they crying?" And she said, "Oh, the doctor didn't tell you?" And I went, "I know." So the doctor came over and he said, "Well, Susan, it was real close. It was real close." I didn't know what he was talking about. He said, "We almost didn't get you back." And I said, "I went somewhere?"
Mm.
And he said, "Yeah, you left us for a while." And another thing I thought was really cool is I said, "Was that when I was on the ceiling?" And he didn't hesitate. He said, "Yeah." And I thought, this happens more than, I mean, he didn't hesitate. He said, "Yep, that was when you were on the ceiling."
Well,
And I
I
said,
heard, excuse me, I heard some ERs actually have writing up there now. So they have writing so that those who have this NDE can actually look and see what's on this, and then they can come back and report, and they know that that's where they were.
"Oh my word, that would be
Yeah.
cool." Um, so, and he said it was really close. We almost didn't get you back.
And
And
it
so,
was an allergic reaction, right? I mean, it wasn't to your mother-in-law's cooking, was it, or what was the deal?
well, it was to, my body became allergic on that night to beef and tea.
Oh my gosh, really?
And the allergist said that once it does that, 50 years from then, you can become allergic to lettuce. So I took a year's worth. I had to do the 160 shots because it's called anaphylaxis. I couldn't breathe. My throat closed. Um, and I took the 160 shots, and they were calling people in the hospital to come look. I reacted to everything of the 160 except chicken and green vegetables. Everything. All
Wow.
animals, all allergens, all outside, all
Wow.
food. And so basically what you have to do is just start eating a little bit at a time until you react again, which that is scary because you're going to have.
Well, I think we're having a technical difficulty here with Susan's feed, and actually we are at our break point. So we're going to take a quick break, and then when we get back, we're going to go before the NDE and pick up your life from when you were born and
Okay.
fill in some of the more details. So we'll see you on the other side of the break. Hi, welcome back to Mind to Heart with your host, Craig Richardson. Before we took our break, Susan was reveling us with this amazing story of her near-death experience. They are, as I said, I find each one, again, while there's some similarities, they're both very compelling and very individual. So, Susan, I wanted to go back to the beginning and just to fill in a little bit and get some some background on who you are and where you grew up, because I know some of that also has an impact on your spirituality. So why don't we start with where you were born and in your family life and things like that?
Okay. So I'm from Richmond. My mom's people are from Wolftown, which is foot of the Blue Ridge Mountain near Madison, Virginia. And my daddy's people are from Richmond. I was born and raised in Richmond. Uh, the I'm sort of a nerd, so I'm one of those kids and adults who really liked school and did well in school. So, school was a big part of my life. Academics, I loved contests and all that stuff. Um, the A huge influence, and now that I look back even more, was my grandmother. And it was my mom's mom. And I grew up hearing ghost stories my whole life. I mean, and they were not supposedly fiction ghost stories. They were real ghost stories that happened up in the mountains, and that my mom would tell me my whole life about my great grandfather coming back, about watching lights go through the house at night. And so that was sort of normal. My grandmother transitioned when I was 5, so I don't remember a lot about her. My cousin, who's 5 years older, said that I would sit on her lap and she'd tell me these stories all weekend. And my cousin said they'd all scare her and I would just eat them up, about the wolves anyway. So I grew up with these stories that were like normal. I mean, I didn't know that everybody's parents didn't tell them these kinds of stories. I also grew up with my grandmother visiting, and nothing was said that was weird. My whole life.
So you actually you experienced her then? You saw her and you experienced her.
I didn't. My mother and my aunt would call each other, and this was not unusual. One would call the other and say, and we called her Na. And my aunt would say to my mom, "Is Na there?" And mama would say, "Yeah." And I'd say, "What are you talking about?" And she'd say, "Oh, your grandmother is rocking the chair at your aunt's. And at my house, she would make a creaking sound." And nobody said that was weird. I thought, okay. Later, when I was a young adult, my grandmother would really, she would like to send me messages or do little things that I don't know if you have. Okay, I'm gonna say this really, really quickly so we don't run over time. The weirdest thing, I actually did think this was a little weird. I was in my 20s. It was after the NDE. And my mom said, "You've got to come over here right now." And my mother and my aunt lived together at that point. And I said, "Okay." And she said, "Na's trying to tell us something and we don't understand. And you have to come tell us what she's trying to say." I said, "What?" She said, "Get over here right now." So I went over to the house and she said, "Go in the bathroom." I'm gonna tell you, this is truth. She said, "Go in the bathroom. Na is rocking the raincoat." Rocking the raincoat. I'll never forget. So I went in the bathroom and I sat on the toilet, and they had a raincoat hanging up, and it was her raincoat, her old London Fog, and it was rocking. It was going back and forth. And she said, "Talk to the coat." I'm telling you the truth. Talk to the coat.
Talk to the coat.
And I said, "I can't talk to a raincoat." And so I'm sitting there and I get up and I look for the vents. I didn't feel any vent, any movement of air. I tried to debunk everything. So I started talking to the coat. And so I said, "Na, is that you? Rock, rock, rock." and just
Oh,
some
wow, like a pendulum,
questions.
like almost like a pendulum.
Like a pin, exactly, except the raincoat on a hanger. And I couldn't understand who the message was for. The message was to be careful. I got that. And I said, who is it for? So it didn't move. So I stood up, and that's one of these things, if it didn't happen to you. I stood up, the arm of the raincoat, oh my word, the arm of the raincoat lifted and landed on my arm.
On
And
your
I
arm.
just stood there. I couldn't move on my arm.
The message was for
And
you.
I said, it's me. For me.
And this was after
So
your
I think
NDE. So you're
that's
like, I don't
probably
want
the
to go. I don't
most
want to leave again.
unusual. Oh yeah, that was, yeah. So anyway, growing up, I'm big Star Trek, Star Wars, love fantasy, love science fiction, loved all the woo-woo, love the woo-woo.
What about, 'cause,
As an adolescent.
Richmond can be a pretty conservative area. What about formal religion? I mean, and a lot of Episcopalians, I think, are down there.
So
I mean,
I hope this doesn't, I'll say what my mom says. I was sprinkled as a Methodist, and then I grew up in the Baptist church. So my mom
okay.
told everybody I was covered because I'd been sprinkled and baptized. And I went to the Baptist church until well into my probably 30s. And I'd go with mama occasionally, but it didn't really, it wasn't me,
I bet you kept
wasn't.
some of these stories under wrap on your Sunday services, probably.
Well, yeah. And I also found out that my grandmother was a medium and
Wow.
would have, my mom said that the house would be full. Now, this is in the foot of the Blue Ridge Mountains, a big old farmhouse, part of it built before in the 1800s. And she said the living room would be full of people, and sometimes she'd do messages and sometimes she'd do seances. So I didn't know that until I was in my 50s. And my whole life, my family said, you're just like your grandmother. You're just like your grandmother. That's the only thing I heard about my grandmother. I was just like her. But I didn't really get it until actually fairly recently, what all that meant.
Well, I know being around you and some of the activities through our church that we go to together, that she comes in fairly regularly. She's usually there at our
She's
circle
there
on
all the
Thursday
time.
night.
She is thrilled. She is so happy that I'm there. That's where she wants me. And it took me a while to find CSE. And I just I've always been, so I don't know if I'm jumping ahead. After the NDE, and I know that's really the next part, but I got just blown way open. So what do I mean is, it just seemed really easy to contact me. Even way, like when I was in my late 20s and 30s and really didn't know everything that was going on, I'd get messages for people in dreams. I would tell people where their car keys were. And it just, I'd been interested in it my whole life, but it just sort of opened up. But that's skipping.
The culture also had to get there too. I mean, I wasn't anywhere I mean, I didn't have any of this really at all in my upbringing. I was more, Christmas and Easter Christian, and then ultimately Catholic. But I think the culture got there too, right? Because the culture wasn't there. I mean, that stuff was pretty, avant-garde, and nobody really talked about it. Like you sort of, pretended that it didn't exist when you went to church. And I think that the culture has also tracked sort of our lives. You and I are fairly close in age group. I mean, it wasn't that way. And you didn't talk about this stuff openly the way we do now.
Well, not in Richmond. Or
Yeah.
not in the city, but in the mountains, it was pretty, wise woman.
What were they? Were those mostly Scotch Irish? Or are they bringing over some stuff from Ireland? Where? Because I know like
German.
Eastern Tennessee can be that way. What was that?
German.
Yeah.
They're all
Okay.
my family is in the Germanic colonies, and they were all came over in 1753 from Germany. And my grandfather was all German, my grandmother, well, they're all German right there. And so, and coming over from Germany, there's lots of folklore, that's lots of wise woman healing, and I think that's why it wasn't weird, because I grew up with my mom. My mom and dad got divorced. So my main family that I was with all the time was my mom's side, who came from the mountains. And, it's good old mountain people, I guess.
Yeah, I think you see that all along the Blue Ridge and then into the Smokies when you get down into Tennessee. And it is, I mean, they do tend to be more Scotch Irish in Tennessee, but it's a similar kind of breed. They bring some of that, and there's the storytelling that they have, and they have and then down there too in Tennessee, you mix in some Cherokee as well, so you got some Native American spirituality going. It is a wonderful that whole mountain range.
Yeah.
Is a wonderful thing. We're going to get into more, as you said, more about the impact that the NDE had on you specifically, because I know you had, as you said, it opened you wide up. So when we come back from the other side of the break, we'll get into that story about how it really changed your spirituality and how it really opened up all your gifts. So thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Hi, welcome back to Mind to Heart with your host, Craig Richardson, and my guest today, Susan Luck, and we're talking about near-death experiences, specifically hers. Susan, we talked a little bit before the break, but I really want to spend this segment talking about, from the point you leave the hospital, you've had this experience, you've seen some incredible things, you've experienced the light and a lot of the things that we discussed in the beginning in the lead up. Tell me how your spirituality, you said it opened you wide open. So take us from that, 25 post NDE and what you started getting into at that point.
So I started getting a lot of messages and dreams. And I could tell they were messages instead of dreams, because they were so, what's it called, lucid. I mean, it was
lucid dream. You were aware of what you were seeing. Yeah.
And the other thing was, I was very, I just had to go and play metaphysically. I'd never done that. So I found a bookstore. I ended up working there 8 years on the weekends. I was very.
Was this in Richmond?
Yeah. Store's still there, actually. My whole life shifted to a more, well, I wasn't calling it spiritual then, but it was more spiritual. It was the woo-woo stuff. It was all the metaphysics. I got really involved really quickly with the whole community in Richmond, and led classes, did some channeling, gave talks, did past life regressions. So my whole life was sort of this metaphysical bent, and I got divorced. So, and I think, so this happened at 25. I got divorced at 32. And I just was changing so much, I guess, as to what was important to me. I really was interested in religion and a lot of the divination, love divination, and and so I had a reading, my first reading, with a pair of psychics from Florida that became dear friends. And so I hadn't told anybody that I was miserable. And so I'm in this great house. You know, we built this huge house. I loved my house. I loved my husband, still do. He's a great guy, but we just shouldn't have been married. And I'm in my kitchen and I get this very first reading back from them on tape.
Was it
You know,
tarot? Was it tarot or was
no,
it
it was a
actual psychic?
psychic reading. And she said, now after the divorce, I'll never forget that. After the divorce, and I ran to the recorder and cut it off and looked around and I thought, how does she know? I mean, I hadn't told Soul, but anyway, so I was learning to meditate. I was taking really cool classes. My ex-husband did not get it, you know, because it was so foreign. You know, I'd been really into it. I used to build cars and race cars, and I did lots of house stuff. He was a really good builder, and I loved all that stuff. And then all of a sudden, I wanted to learn how to meditate, you know, and I wanted to learn about Native Americans. And so we got divorced, and that seemed to open up too. That must have relaxed, but it was just my whole frame shifted. And I have a visual, and I don't know, but my visual is it was like when I died, I poked a hole in something. I like went when I was on the ceiling, I was somewhere else. It was like I'd left here and went to there. Now I don't know where there is.
No,
But
you pierced the veil, really. You pierced the veil, and I think, as I talked about in the setup, you know, when you actually, we can read it in all we want and we can intellectualize it, but when you actually experience it, and I've heard this from other people who have had the same experience. My dear friend Stephanie had one as well, and you know, we're almost envious that, you know, I know it's going to be there. I just have never had one, but yeah, you've got a taste of the other side.
and it's like that's been open since then. And I absolutely have no fear of death. Absolutely. It was actually very nice. uh meaning the feeling was just calm, and you know that it was just, now I didn't want to stay, but I know I'm not worried about when that time comes. And I know I'm not being very articulate because it's hard to, it's like my whole um my whole being shifted. And I started getting regular messages for people through dreams. And I had to give them the message. I mean, it was like I was being nag, and everything went fine until I got a message from my boss at work,
Ooh,
who
that's a little bit of a conflict of interest.
who thought I was weird anyway and didn't
So you
really know
confirmed
me.
it.
And so I thought, so I went into her office. Oh, it was awful. I went into her office and I said, look, I had this dream, da da da. And I have I know you don't, but I'm just going to tell you what this dream said. And I'll never forget it. She said, so I said, there's something about somebody falling down steps. And she said, who told you? Who told you? How did you? I just went ballistic. And I said,
Oh my
I
God.
don't know who fell down steps. I just know somebody fell down steps. And so she was freaking out, thought somebody had told me something. And then I said, well, the message is that you need to go. So that's all I know. Somebody fell down the steps and you need to go. And so after she totally freaked out, she said her aunt had slipped, it was winter, had slipped and fallen down steps and hit her head and died. And
Oh my God.
she had decided not to go to the funeral.
Oh, so that's the go. Yeah.
And so unfortunately, I let that freak me out because she got so freaked out, and I stopped having those dreams. And
Did she go to the funeral?
she did. Yeah, everybody told them what I did, what I told them. Um, uh, and
I
so
thought
I
when you
just,
first said I thought when you first said that she had pushed somebody down the stairs, but that, it's like,
her aunt had fallen, and it was weird because she was so not into any of this, and I kept trying to say to her, that's all I know, falling down the stairs. I don't know who, how, what, even where. Um, but anyway, I have stopped having those. I hope to start having them again because they were very helpful to people. But I did a lot of divination. I did a lot of card reading. I studied. I did a lot of spiritual study. I dabbled with Rosicrucianism. I thought that was interesting because of the manifestation. You're making things move and stuff.
right,
um
right.
I really for a long time was heavily into Native American spirituality and Hinduism, and then found the Unity Church in Richmond, and that changed my whole life too spiritually, because they use the Bible metaphorically. Anyway, it just really spoke to me. So I started going to the Unity Church. I still considered myself. I took lots of seminars. I took a seminar once and they wanted to know what my religion was. So I put Native American Hindu, and they didn't argue
They didn't
with me.
appreciate that.
Well, but that was true. I mean, it was like, well, what am I most relating to? And at that time in my life, it was Native American spiritualism and Hinduism. And so I said Native American Hindu. Um, and
What was driving you? I mean, obviously the experience itself, and you said it totally changed your paradigm. And for me, because I didn't have that necessarily, and now that I've found, I think where I'm more comfortable, I'm less driven by this. But for me, it was sort of a wanting to know how it all worked, and sort of that masculine, like how do we, figuring it out. What was actually driving all of this? Was it just a curiosity, or was it were you trying looking for answers?
it was now I have a clearer idea. I was trying to find what made sense to me, what what seemed real to me. Um, I I used to have this great book I was going to write, and maybe I will one day. But I'm talking back in my 20s. This came to me that I wanted to interview leaders of every religion, and I wanted to ask them what the bottom line of the religion was. And my thesis was that they were all going to be the same.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't matter if it was pagan, if it was if it was Catholic, it didn't matter. If it was Muslim, it didn't matter. That I had this idea, and I still do, that they all are bottom line. It's talking about love, and
Yeah.
me and love and fear. But I think the whole thing is about love, and so that was way early on for me, this love thing.
Well, you
um
came close. You touched it. I mean, you like that's the NDE experience. You came closer than us average people. And it's interesting you mentioned that because that was ultimately when I left the Catholic Church where I was for 15 years, very formal. I kind of went out like with a critical mind. I looked at the Bhagavad Gita, and I did come to that conclusion. I didn't do an extensive study, but I was like, I was expecting it to be different. And when you carved away the sort of Vatican top down stuff and looked at the message of Jesus, and I still love scripture and I read the Bible regularly, but it's all of that. God is love, and we're called to love each other. So that's the bottom line.
it is.
We're gonna take our final break here, Susan. When we get back, I want to kind of pick this general theme up. Maybe take a bird's eye view, sort of what major lessons you're probably half your life now removed from this ND, but
Oh yeah.
what major impacts it's had on your life, how that's impacted your worldview, and where you kind of see this going now. So we'll pick this up on the other side of the break. Thank you. Hi, welcome back to Mind to Heart with your host, Craig Richardson, and my good friend, Susan Luck, who's been telling us about her near death experiences and the impact that's had on her spirituality. So, Susan, in our last segment, I want to, as I said, pick up where we left off in the previous segment and tell us as you matured, and I know you said the bookstore for 8 years. Looking back, how has that evolved your spirituality, and where are you kind of today? And we'll spend the last few minutes talking about this kind of things.
The Right now, I think I'm the most comfortable spiritually than in my whole life. I A big thing was I found where I think I'm supposed to be as far as a church.
Hmm.
And and it's actually sometimes if I'm feeling a little down or what, I know I need to be around you all. I need to
Right.
be in the building. So that's been a giant thing for my spirituality, is finding where I'm supposed to be. In general, I have, and I guess as you've said, it's like as I'm maturing, as I'm growing, that right now spirituality is the most important thing for me. It
Hmm.
is the number one. It is what I want to be about. It's what I want, how I want to show up. And I work in a very government, structured um, environment, and I still show up. I'm okay with the way I show up because I am who I am. So I'm comfortable with who I am. I really have a deep knowing that, and I guess my huge thing in life right now, and for a very long time actually, has been love. And
Yep.
the difference in love and fear. And we either come out of love or out of fear. And that I think that's what it's about. I think it's all about coming from a place of love as you interact with people, anybody. It's my I'm real comfortable with my I have a statement, I have a mission statement, and it's make it better. And what I mean is every interaction I have with the person, I mean, on the sidewalk, I want I want to be a positive influence to that person, whether it just be a smile or a compliment. It, and again, I'm not being very articulate. Um, but that's who I am now. I mean, that's just my being. And
Isn't that
go
isn't
ahead.
that ultimately who we're called to be? I mean, I know, I mean, and I think you and I are in a similar area. We're in the Northern Virginia, and it's it can be pretty competitive here, and so this is certainly a tough place to do that. But I do think and then you and I were in this book club, and we just read Conversations with God, and I sort of took the easy way out with the first book and watched the movie. But there was a line in the movie which, instead of "What would Jesus do," the line was, "What would love do now?" And that's essentially what God's message to the author of that book was, to look at every situation and say, what would God do? Now, as a Boston driver, I have the hardest time when I'm behind a road, behind a steering wheel, because I'm sort of, the tendency in Boston is to cut somebody off and then flip them off. So and again, in this environment, I think you certainly, and I think you do a better job than I do at it. But I certainly think it's a tough environment for to do that. And I think that's a little bit like the sandpaper. It helps to get you more and more polished, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. I just did for work a little session on the science of happiness, and for work, government, it was all related. It was great. But I gave them homework, and I'd like to give everyone that's listening some homework, same homework. And that is to get a picture of something or an object, but a picture, and it the picture of what could this picture, you cannot look at it without smiling. It is impossible. You can be in the worst mood, and if you see this picture, you're gonna smile. And it can be, for me, it's a dog, but it can be pets, children, spouses. It doesn't, golf clubs. I don't care what it is. And put it. This is what reminded me of you saying your Boston driving. Put it like somewhere you can look up and see it when you're working. Put it somewhere in your car. Put it on your wallet, because if it's a picture, you have to smile. You have to. And they cut you off, and you're about to flip them off, and you see this picture. It literally, it changes chemically, when you smile. But when you smile, then it's more of those positive love hormones that get secreted, and your mind will go to that cute chihuahua, for example. That's my
Chloe,
so
Susan has a chihuahua, by the way, Chloe, named Chloe, who
that's
makes us
right.
all smile, actually, every time she
It's
comes to church. She's a cute little dog.
but that's the homework I gave to the government folks, and I'd love to challenge folks to do that here. That'll help this whole thing, as we were talking about love, what would love do? The smile will help. I'm telling you, it's a little thing, but it works.
Well, and I noticed that too. If you're willing, even at the, the checkout counter, if you're just willing to engage somebody in a conversation, it doesn't have to be, you're not going to necessarily spread the gospel or anything, but just like you
Oh,
said, just smile and ask them how their day's going. And I mean, people appreciate that. And I think particularly since we've all been, depending on where you are, I mean, everyone's been locked at home for a year. And, I think, people are really, and maybe that's one of the silver linings of this whole lockdown is that people, once we come out of this, people are going to be they're missed that personal contact, that love that you talked about, and hopefully we'll be a happier, more loving uh, country at that point.
and Craig, I want to thank you for. I've made a realization today I hadn't put together until this moment, and that feeling of love. That's my whole deal is this love stuff. And when you gave the intro and when you said something a few minutes ago, it was the feeling. I swear I'm gonna cry. It was the feeling that I felt when I was gone, when I was on the ceiling. I'm gonna cry. And that's what started it. It was that feeling that I was experiencing, this just real love. And that's the difference it's made in my life. And I didn't put it together till right talking to you. So I
Well,
have to
that's
thank you
beautiful
for
because I
that.
do think that's what, and isn't that what we all long for? And I'm going to be speaking on church on Sunday. I'm going to get into a little bit of this. But that's what really, and I think, and if you have that special person or dog or whatever, that it helps you get through that, it's because, that we're here to learn on the earth plane. Right. And it's tough. I mean, and like I said it before in the intro, a lot of people go on the other side and they experience that and they don't want to come back. I mean, who would, if you have that sort of just top to bottom embellished in love.
Yeah.
So I think but I think in this day and age now with us moving more into 5D, that has the, when I did my life purpose, I was a torchbearer for truth and freedom for others. And I think we're all torchbearers who have at least understand enough to know that love is the answer, to sound like I'm coming out of the 60s, but I think that's right. We have a couple minutes left, or about a minute and a half. I think I might guess where you want to go in terms of your closing remarks, but I'll let you sort of give us some parting wisdom before we end our time today.
So, where I'm going to go is either choose, you have a choice of coming from a place of love or a place of fear. And when you make that choice to come from a place of love, it changes your life. It changes your relationships. It changes everything for the better. And so there are lots of books, there are lots of, things you can read about the conversations with God. My favorite, Love is Letting Go of Fear. But think about consciously choosing to come from a place of love. And I love to end that. What would love do?
That was beautifully said, Susan. I really, and I love you, and I appreciate you coming on my show. And
fun.
you've been a good friend to me, and it's great going through this journey together. And I appreciate you being on my guest this last hour. And until 2 weeks from now, I guess I will say goodbye. Thank you. Thanks for listening to Mind to Heart with me, Craig Richardson. My path has led me from the Protestant and Catholic churches, as well as studies in alchemy, mediumship, Eastern philosophy, and most recently, Edgar Cayce and transpersonal psychology. As an intuitive life coach, I am ready to guide you to an amazing life. For more information about me, visit craigericardson.com.